When my son hired a caregiver for me, I thought he was finally showing responsibility. I'm in my late 60s, not helpless, just slowed down by age. A little support sounded fine. But weeks into this arrangement, I started noticing things: my bank account slowly draining, pills in my medicine organizer that looked different, and the way my caregiver, Marina, always smiled too wide when my son visited. I didn't want to believe it at first. Not from my own flesh and blood. But the body doesn't lie. My strength was fading fast. I'd go to bed with a full fridge and wake up to empty shelves. They thought I was slipping. But I was documenting everything. Every theft. Every lie. Every conversation. I let them think they had won until I reminded them who raised the man they were trying to break. I never imagined my own son would treat me like an obstacle to be managed. After losing my wife 5 years ago, I'd grown used to solitude. Daniel, my only child, had moved to another city shortly after the funeral. Said the memories were too painful. I understood. We all grieve in different ways. I didn't hear much from him after that: the occasional call on my birthday, a text at Christmas, maybe a visit once a year, always brief and half-hearted. Still, I never held it against him. I figured he was just busy with his life. That changed last winter. Daniel showed up unannounced, hugging me tighter than usual, wearing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He looked around the house like he was assessing damage. Said he was worried about me. Said I shouldn't be living alone anymore. I told him I was managing just fine, but he kept pressing. "Dad, you're getting older. You shouldn't be climbing ladders or cooking alone. What if you fall? What if something happens?" I saw the concern in his voice, but there was something else underneath. Something practiced. He suggested hiring a live-in caregiver. Said he'd take care of everything. I hesitated. I liked my privacy. But I didn't want to argue. Maybe some help wouldn't hurt. A week later, Marina moved in. Early 40s, Eastern European accent, efficient and polite. She took over the kitchen, the cleaning, even my medications. At first, it was fine. She kept things organized. Made bland but edible meals. Reminded me to take my pills. But she also asked a lot of questions. Too many. About my finances. About whether I had a will. About how often I spoke to my son. "He loves you very much," she would say, smiling just a little too long. At night, I'd hear her talking to someone in the hallway softly, in Russian or Ukrainian, I couldn't tell. I began to feel watched. Monitored. And then came the weakness. Subtle at first. I chalked it up to aging. My legs felt heavy. My arms tired quicker. I lost interest in food, and I couldn't remember the last time I had a full night's sleep. My thoughts started clouding over like fog on a windowpane. That's when I checked my pill bottles. Some of the capsules looked different. Same label, same dosage, but the pills were slightly off color. I mentioned it to Marina, and she smiled sweetly. "You must be remembering wrong, Mr. Green. These are your normal pills." I nodded, but something twisted in my gut. I waited until she went to the store and took photos of every pill in the house. I still had an old laptop with a webcam. I set it up in my study, the one room Marina didn't bother cleaning, and pointed it toward the hallway. It recorded silently, motion triggered. I also bought a notebook. Every time I felt dizzy, every time a bank charge looked unfamiliar, every time I caught Marina snooping through drawers, I wrote it down. Within weeks, I had pages. Daniel called more often now. Always when Marina was in the room. He'd ask if I needed anything, if I felt okay, but he never waited for the answer. He'd tell me not to worry about bills, he had access to my accounts now just in case. I had agreed to that in a moment of weakness months ago. A decision I now regretted with every fiber of my being. Then came the doctor's visit. Marina insisted I see someone after I collapsed briefly in the hallway. Daniel came to drive me. The doctor, a man I'd never met before, glanced at my chart, took a few basic tests, and declared I was suffering from early-onset dementia. I tried to object. Tried to explain the weakness, the pills, the changes. But Daniel patted my shoulder and thanked the doctor like he'd just received confirmation of what he expected. They started talking about power of attorney. About moving me into a care home. I nodded along silently, heart pounding. I wasn't crazy. I knew what was happening. They were planning something, pushing me aside without realizing I was still watching. Still listening. Still very much alive inside this fading shell. The moment they said care home, something inside me locked into place. It wasn't fear, it was resolve. I had raised Daniel better than this. I had given him everything. Worked double shifts to pay for his college. Let him live rent-free until he was 30. And now he wanted to ship me off, write me off like a broken appliance. I kept pretending. That was the only way. I let them think I was slipping. I let my hands tremble a little more, my voice stammer slightly when I spoke. I even forgot my own birthday on purpose just to see how they'd react. Marina smiled more. Daniel started coming over less. One day, I saw her take photos of the house documents from my drawer. Another time, she logged into my online banking when she thought I was napping. But the webcam caught it all. I uploaded the footage to a USB stick and hid it inside an old book cover on my shelf. Not just one file, dozens. Every theft. Every unauthorized login. Every strange visitor Marina brought into the house at night when she thought I was asleep. Men. Once, even Daniel. They whispered in the kitchen, always checking over their shoulders. I had no proof of what they were planning, but I didn't need it yet. I just needed to survive. My body continued to deteriorate. Whether it was poison, sedatives, or some slow medical sabotage, I didn't know. But I started preparing. I ordered backup meds from a trusted pharmacy, using a separate card they didn't know about. I stored them in my toolbox in the garage, behind old rusted nails. I began eating less of Marina's food and cooking myself small meals when she was out, just enough to stay functional. The fog in my head lifted slightly. That confirmed it. They were drugging me. I checked my accounts daily now. Daniel had set up automatic transfers, a few hundred here, 1,000 there. Always disguised as utilities or home maintenance. The total losses were over $18,000 in 4 months. I printed the statements and tucked them away. My neighbor, Rick, a gruff old man who liked beer and silence, became my ally without knowing it. I asked him one afternoon, casually, if I could store a few old documents in his garage since mine had a leak. He agreed with a grunt. I gave him a sealed box filled with my USBs, financial printouts, and a handwritten letter describing everything. Just in case. Then came the night I heard Marina on the phone, not whispering, but shouting. Something had gone wrong. He's still alert, he's not supposed to be. I froze in my bed. She was panicking. We need to speed this up before he gets a lawyer involved. He's hiding things. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would break my ribs. The next morning, she was sweet again. Eggs and toast, extra butter. I didn't touch it. I smiled, thanked her, and flushed it down the toilet while she vacuumed. That same day, I went to see a real doctor. Took a taxi while Marina was out buying groceries. I told the doctor everything. He ran tests. Full blood panel, cognitive assessment, motor function. His verdict? I was fine, weakened, yes, likely from malnutrition and overmedication, but mentally and neurologically sound. I asked him to put it in writing. He did. I now had medical proof that I was not demented. On my way home, I bought a burner phone. I messaged Rick from it with instructions: if anything happens to me, call this number. It was my lawyer's. I'd updated my will weeks ago. I removed Daniel. Gave everything to charity and a few old friends. If Daniel wanted a fight, he'd get one. But not on his terms. On mine. That evening, I called Daniel myself. Told him I was ready to move into a care home. Told him I trusted his judgment. He was thrilled. Or at least he pretended to be. He said he'd come by next weekend to finalize things. I smiled through the phone and told him I loved him. Then I hung up and went back to my computer. I compiled all the evidence: bank theft, video surveillance, audio recordings, screenshots. I wrote a summary document, 3 pages long, labeling each file. When I was done, I emailed a copy to my lawyer and scheduled it to send again every week automatically. Then I waited. 5 more days. 5 more fake meals. 5 more quiet nights with my heart hammering in my chest. And then came the visit that would change everything. Daniel showed up wearing his business casual outfit. Marina had baked something, cinnamon cookies or whatever, passed for comfort food. They sat me down at the kitchen table like I was a child. "Dad," Daniel began, "we found a place for you. It's private, clean, and you'll have your own room." Marina smiled like it was the best news in the world. "You deserve rest, Mr. Green. We'll handle everything now." "That's kind of you," I said, reaching for my tea. I let the silence stretch. "You know," I added slowly, "I've been doing some thinking lately." Daniel nodded absently. Marina looked bored. And I realized something strange. My bank account's been bleeding money. And some of my meds look off. That got their attention. Marina's eyes flicked to Daniel. Daniel's smile froze. "Dad," he started. "Don't worry," I said, standing up. "I took care of it. My lawyer has all the files. The police too." The color drained from their faces. "What files?" Marina asked, voice sharp. I pulled a USB from my pocket and placed it on the table. "This one's just for you. Consider it a preview." Daniel reached for it, but I snatched it back. "Aha! That's not how this works." I leaned in. "You forgot who I am. I built my life from nothing. I survived wars, debt, grief. You think you can drug me and steal my home because I limp when I walk?" Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. "Leave. Both of you. If I see either of you again, I'll make sure the media gets everything." Marina tried to protest, but Daniel grabbed her arm. He knew I wasn't bluffing. They left in silence. I locked the door behind them. I never saw either of them again. But that wasn't the end. The silence after they left was deafening. No more fake kindness, no more poison meals, no more footsteps creeping through the hallway at night. For the first time in nearly a year, I slept through the night without fear. I woke up at dawn, made myself a proper breakfast, and sat on the porch with a hot cup of coffee, watching the sun creep over the rooftops. For a while, I let myself believe it was over. But deep down, I knew people like Daniel and Marina didn't just disappear. They regrouped. They schemed. And they came back. 3 days later, I got a letter in the mail. Legal looking. Clean envelope, typed address. I opened it and felt my stomach knot. Daniel was contesting my will. He claimed I was mentally unfit and had been manipulated into changing it. Marina had filed a report with Adult Protective Services, claiming elder abuse against me in my own house. I laughed. Out loud. Not because it was funny, because it was so predictable it was almost sad. They were desperate. They thought they could twist the narrative, play the concerned family card. What they didn't know was that I'd already filed my own reports. With timestamps. With video. With verified medical proof. I called my lawyer, forwarded the documents, and told him to go scorched earth. "No settlements," I said. "No apologies. I want them buried in paperwork." The court hearing was set for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, I started getting calls from unknown numbers. Hang-ups. Voicemails with static. Once, a whispered voice, "You'll regret this." I recorded everything. Sent it to my lawyer. Rick, my neighbor, offered to install a camera facing my driveway. He didn't say much, just grunted and nodded when I handed him a six-pack in thanks. That camera caught Marina 2 nights later, trying to sneak into my mailbox. She wore a hoodie, but the footage was clear. I filed a police report. They didn't arrest her, but they gave her a warning. That seemed to spook them for a while. Court day came like a storm. Daniel arrived with a high-priced lawyer and a folder full of lies. Marina sat beside him, dressed in muted colors like she was mourning someone. I brought my medical report, financial statements, video files, and a calm, steel-eyed lawyer named Beth who didn't blink once during the entire session. When they claimed I had been manipulated, Beth played the audio of Marina shouting into her phone, "We need to speed this up before he gets a lawyer." When they accused me of erratic behavior, we played a clip of Marina stealing medication from my cabinet. When they said I had been unstable, we provided my doctor's testimony live, via video call, confirming my mental clarity. The judge wasn't just unconvinced by Daniel's claims, she was disgusted. "This borders on criminal exploitation," she said, staring at my son like he was something she'd scrape off her shoe. "I'm recommending this be forwarded to the DA's office." Daniel's lawyer paled. Marina began to cry. "Daniel?" He just clenched his jaw, like a child caught in a lie. "I won the case. Officially. Publicly. Legally. But it wasn't just a legal win. It was something deeper, like reclaiming the years they tried to take from me. I walked out of that courtroom taller. Lighter. Like I'd shed a weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. News traveled fast. Within days, local papers were running small blurbs about an elderly man wrongfully targeted by his own family. A few websites picked it up too. They didn't name Daniel or Marina, but people who knew them, they connected the dots. Marina lost her job at a private clinic. Daniel's company put him on indefinite leave. Apparently, embezzling from your own father doesn't play well on LinkedIn. Rick brought over beers the next Friday. We didn't talk about the case. Just sat in the garage, radio playing low. But as he left, he clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You did good, old man." That meant more than anything. Months passed. I traveled a little. Took a train up north, saw the forests I'd loved as a boy. I even met someone, Elaine. Widow. Strong hands, sharper eyes. We talked about everything except the past. It was good. Real. Healing. And then one morning, I got a package. No return address. Just a small box, taped shut. Inside was a single item, a photo. Me and Daniel. I was holding him as a baby. His smile was wide. Mine, not so much. On the back, in his handwriting, "I didn't deserve you." No name. No explanation. Just that. I never heard from him again. Sometimes I wonder where he ended up. If he changed. If Marina left him or if they're still stuck in the same toxic dance. But I don't dwell on it. Because in the end, I didn't just survive. I rebuilt. I protected what was mine. And I reminded them and myself that some old men don't fade quietly. Some of us fight. And win. After Daniel's silent goodbye in the form of that photograph, I waited, half expecting more chaos, another twist, some last-ditch effort to reclaim what he thought he was owed. But weeks passed quietly. Then months. I got used to the peace. The house, once filled with manipulation and whispered resentment, now echoed with music, radio shows, the sound of my own contentment. Elaine became a regular presence. She had her own place, but every weekend she'd bring over a pie or a box of old vinyls. We didn't need to talk about what I'd been through. She knew. Sometimes she'd just sit beside me, our hands brushing, and that was enough. I started writing again. Old habit from younger days. I wrote it all down, not out of spite, but to remind myself of the lessons I'd earned. I wrote about betrayal. About greed. But mostly, about how easy it is to overlook the signs when you're lonely. And how powerful it is when you finally stand up. My lawyer, Beth, called me one afternoon. "You'll want to see this," she said. She emailed over a public court document. Marina had been arrested, not because of my case, but for prescription fraud and patient intimidation. Turned out, she'd been stealing meds from elderly patients at her clinic for months. My case had prompted someone else to speak up. That snowballed. Now she was facing multiple charges. That news hit harder than I expected. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just sat there for a long while, letting the quiet settle in around me. She wasn't just my son's girlfriend. For nearly a year, she was in my home. Feeding me. Touching my things. Planning my death, essentially. That kind of poison doesn't leave easily. But justice, slow and heavy as it may be, had finally caught up. As for Daniel, I heard he moved out of state. Arizona, maybe. One of my neighbors said they saw his profile online, working as a low-level office admin after being blacklisted in our city. No more expensive suits. No more lavish parties. Just a name now associated with greed and disgrace. That was enough for me. I never sought revenge. Just clarity. I spent the rest of that year rebuilding not just the house, but my confidence. I hired a local artist to repaint the living room. Changed the locks. Got a new bed. These things may seem small, but they mattered. Every change erased a bit more of the rot they'd left behind. Rick, bless him, took me fishing one weekend. We didn't catch a damn thing, but that wasn't the point. Out on the lake, with nothing but the sound of water and birds, I finally felt like myself again. And then, one chilly evening in early December, Elaine and I sat by the fireplace, sipping tea. She looked at me over the rim of her cup and said, "You ever think about selling the place? Starting fresh somewhere else?" I blinked. "You mean move?" "Yeah. Not because you have to. Because you want to." It hit me then, I had spent so long defending this house, this land, this legacy, maybe I forgot that freedom also meant choosing to let go. I didn't answer right away. But over the next few days, the idea took root. A smaller place. Near the mountains, maybe. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere new. I called Beth again. Told her to look into real estate agents. Within weeks, I had offers on the house. Good ones. People wanted this place. I took only what mattered, a few boxes of books, my old record player, the letters I'd written. Elaine and I packed up, hand in hand. Before we drove off, I stood one last time on the porch. The same spot where I'd once been poisoned. Where I'd once feared every creak of the floorboards. Now, I looked out at the street and saw freedom. Elaine squeezed my arm. "You ready?" "Yeah," I said. "Let's go." We settled in a modest cabin at the edge of a forest town 2 hours away. Fresh air, clean slate, and not a single memory attached to the walls. The locals were kind, the days were slower, and the nights quiet. Elaine opened a small bookshop in town, something she always wanted. I helped her set up the shelves, painted the sign myself. Second Chances, it read. Couldn't have picked a better name. I didn't tell many people who I was, or what had happened. I didn't need to. Here, I wasn't the father who'd been betrayed, or the old man who'd nearly been killed in his own home. I was just another man with stories behind his eyes. One day, about 6 months after we moved, I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a single photo. Daniel. Working behind a gas station counter. Wearing a name tag. Dan, he looked thinner. Tired. But not dead. Not broken. Just changed. On the back of the photo was one sentence, written in a hand I recognized immediately. Marina's. Funny how things turn out. I burned it. Didn't even hesitate. There was no part of me that needed to answer, react, or respond. Their story was over. Mine had just begun. I spent my mornings walking through the trees. My afternoons writing. My evenings watching the sun slip behind the pines, hand in hand with a woman who didn't want anything from me but presence. I was 67 when I nearly lost everything. And 68 when I found something better. That's the truth of life, I've learned. Sometimes you have to lose everything to see who you really are. And sometimes, the people who tried to bury you end up digging their own graves. I don't forgive Daniel. I don't forget what he did. But I've stopped carrying it. That's my freedom. That's my justice. He thought he could silence me, drain me, erase me. But I spoke louder, not with words, but with a life rebuilt. One where peace wasn't a reward, but a right. And I'll protect it every day I've got left. Because some lessons come late. But they stay with you forever.